Hi, and welcome to the next episode of Belly to Belly. And today we're here with great friend David Rose from U.S. Expansion Partners. Hey, David, how are you?
Ahoy, Bill. Good to see you.
Ahoy, David. So we're here today. You've just recently released this wonderful ebook called The 12 Essentials You Need to Know for U.S. Expansion. And our goal today is really to talk through that as a resource for companies that are expanding to the U.S. And I guess the first question I'd have is, why? Why did you sort of go to the trouble of authoring this resource?
Well, we found early on when we started talking to companies about coming to the U.S., they typically had the same questions over and over and over. And so I thought it might be a good resource to kind of address a lot of those things up front. And so the first time someone reaches out to us, like, hey, here's a good starting point for a U.S. expansion journey, and it allows us to kind of have a more in-depth conversation if they have all those kind of starting points, or they have some baseline understanding. So it was a little bit selfishness on my part, trying to save time, but I think it's a good resource for people who are coming to the U.S. for the first time. It's kind of, here's a good starting point to understand a lot of the basics.
Cool. And so as you think about it, and I've read through the book and it's really helpful, but what are some of the things you hope companies get out of it?
Well, I think there's a lot of misunderstandings. If you haven't done business in the U.S. market before, there's a lot of things that aren't necessarily intuitive. So I think one of them is when you're coming to the U.S. market, you're used to, say you're coming from the U.K., you're used to dealing with one government entity. And when people come to the U.S., what they don't realize is there's a federal government, and then there's 50 state governments who have different rules and compliance and tax law. And so you really have to very quickly, when you start doing business in the U.S., be prepared to work across multiple tax jurisdictions and multiple government jurisdictions and multiple sets of compliance who are oftentimes even in conflict. And so I think I want people to understand, like, here's some things you need to be thinking about. Like, they have no idea that the state income tax by state varies pretty dramatically. And where you set your company up will have a material impact on your tax burden.
Sure. And you mentioned tax, and obviously there can be sales tax. There can be a variety of other taxes. So understanding that from a state to state and federal standpoint, obviously critically important. What are some of the other things that you really want companies to hear?
If I was going to redo the book, we'd probably reorder it a little bit. So the very first chapter is on forming a U.S. entity. But as we do more of these onboardings with U.S. companies or companies coming to the U.S. for the first time, we really understand better now the first step is finding an address, because you have to have an address before you can have a federal ID number or a bank account or any of those things that are super important. And so I think a lot of times we work a lot with European and UK tech companies coming to the US. And the kind of the natural destinations they think in their mind are oftentimes either Silicon Valley, because they are a tech company, or New York City, because they've been there and there's a certain amount of familiarity. And so we actually have like a 10-step site selection criteria we actually walk people through to help them understand what is really the best place for them to be in the US. And that's kind of the starting point. So a lot of times there's more options than maybe Silicon Valley or New York City that could be a much better fit, much lower operating costs, much more convenient to commute back and forth, good access to talent and customers. And so that's really the starting point. It's like, hey, here's 10 things you need to think about when you start trying to think about where you're going to set up your U.S. headquarters.
Well, and as I hear you, I'm thinking, gosh, and this locating conversation has nothing to do with where you're going to form your business, because that for many companies is a Delaware corporation. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? It's because it's such a unique thing to the U.S. is that it doesn't really matter where you form from where you operate.
Yeah, and I think one thing I tell companies when I talk to them for the first time is like, look, I've been the CEO of 3 different Delaware C corporations, and I've never once been to the state of Delaware. So where you're forming a Delaware C corporation is just where you do the paperwork. It has no impact at all on where your company's located, where your employees are located, where you do the paperwork. It's just kind of the standard place where the U.S. business community has kind of consolidated around to do business. So just so you know, you're probably going to form a Delaware C corporation for a variety of reasons we won't go into today. But then you're going to domicile your company in another city called Atlanta, Georgia, where that's where your company will be located. It'll impact your payroll taxes and your income taxes and some other kind of variable compliance issues.
Right. It is. I actually just had this conversation with a company yesterday, and of course, the immediate thing that you and I both do is neither one of us are attorneys, so we're having this conversation, but talk to an attorney.
Right. There's professionals who know all the fine points of this.
Exactly. So what other things would you hope companies would take away from the ebook?
Well, because we spend a lot of time with venture-backed tech companies, a lot of companies will raise their initial pre-seed or seed capital in the UK or Europe and then look to the US to kind of do their A round and beyond. It's kind of a pretty common path. And I think there's a lot of misperceptions about raising capital in the US, namely that it's easy. Because if you look at the tech press, everyone's raising hundreds of billions of dollars on billion-dollar valuations, and it's super easy. And I think the perception is that, to raise capital in the US, you have a lot of passion and a great idea. You fly to SFO, you rent a car, you drive to Sand Hill Road, and there you'll find partners at the top venture capital firms in the world lined up to throw term sheets at your convertible as you drive down Sand Hill Road. And the reality was it's really, really difficult to raise capital in the US. Like, look, I'm an old white guy with an MBA and 4 exits. If you and I, Bill, we're going to go start a company today and I was going to go raise capital, my expectation would be we would have 100 no's before we get our first term sheet. And that shocks a lot of people. I think a lot of times people come and they make a trip to San Francisco and expect to walk away with a term sheet. And man, it is a long game and it is a long relationship building piece. So I think we have a whole page just on raising venture capital and kind of expectations. And number one is expect 100 no's before you get your first term sheet. And it's a lot more difficult than people realize.
Well, yeah, even thinking statistically, is only 1% of companies ever are able to raise seed or venture funding. So
Right.
You're already in rare air.
Sure. For sure.
Raising money. So the expectation is certainly unique. But we did coin the phrase "money grows on trees." I guess just not on Sand Hill Road, right?
Right, not just there. Another thing, Bill, that I find that I want to help people better understand is, and this, this is something you're talk about a lot, is the go-to-market strategy. I think a lot of times when someone interviews a salesperson in the US, that person is super charming and super charismatic, and maybe they sold $5 million in ARR at their last company. And the thought is, oh, great, Susie sold $5 million in ARR at her last company. She's going to sell $5 million in ARR when we hire her for our company.
Right.
And they don't realize that the reason Susie sold $5 million in ARR last year, not only is she charismatic and hardworking, those type of things, but there's a super sophisticated demand gen, lead qualification machine behind her. And that's how these US reps are able to be so productive. And so I think a common mistake is they hire Susie, they expect Susie to go generate $5 million in ARR, but there is no demand gen, lead gen machine to back that up. And Susie quits and leaves, and it's a super expensive hire that you don't want to fail.
Yeah, we think of that like, oh, you hired Susie to drive a car, but when she arrives, the expectation is she needs to build the car and build the road. And Susie's just not equipped to do that. I mean, she's a car driver, and she needs to drive the car. And you need to give her a good road and a lot of fuel and a good car to go.
Right. So we talk a lot about, like, there's all these operational details that companies just don't have any awareness of, and we help a lot with those operational details. But ultimately, people want to come to the U.S. because they want to increase revenues and take advantage of the huge U.S. market. Well, once you have all those operational details set up, now you're ready, but you still have to have a go-to-market to actually generate revenue. And just people don't understand that having a great product isn't enough and will not win the day.
No, there are lots of great products, and there are even lots of inferior products that sell because they've got a system. Yeah, for sure. Totally. So we'll absolutely put a link to the ebook here in the description, and certainly let folks know about it. But just so they have some context, can you tell us a little bit about U.S. expansion partners and what you do specifically to help U.S. companies coming in, or international companies coming into the U.S.?
Yeah, so we've actually mapped out the U.S. expansion process, Bill, like end to end. It's 52 steps. And we think about each one of those steps as essentially being impediments to revenue. So if you're serious about coming to the U.S. and serious about driving revenue here, you can either try and figure all that out from thousands of miles away, or for the price of a junior sales rep, you can hire the team who knows more about that end-to-end process than anybody on the planet to just handle it for you. That's the easiest way to think about it. We will launch and run your U.S. operations so you can get to revenue as quickly as possible.
Love that. That's such a simple way to look at it. And so, are there industries that you specialize in, or certain types of businesses you specialize in?
Well, our ICP, our ideal customer profile, right, is a UK or EU business to business SaaS software company with $2 million in ARR who has just closed a $5 million fresh equity round. That being said, last year we had a publicly traded Korean biotech company, which couldn't be anything further from our ICP. But what we've really learned is all those underlying operational details, they're pretty ubiquitous, right? We're never going to help. Our team is never going to lead a biotech company through the drug approval process with the FDA for a new compound. But we can certainly get the business up and running operationally, and then we do have partners we could leverage to help with the FDA approval process. That's just not our strong point.
You have to pick your battles for sure, and that is a very much a specialty. Well, David, this has been fantastic. Again, we'll put the links to the ebook and your contact info in the description. Any parting words? Anything else that we should make sure people know?
I like everyone to know where you are today, Bill. Where are you sailing in the world?
Today we are on a mooring in Bristol, Rhode Island. So beautiful sunny day. Water temperature is about 25 degrees Celsius, and air temperatures probably near 30. So not so bad.
Fantastic. You deserve that. You deserve that.
Somebody's got to do it, right?
For sure.
Well,
great seeing
fantastic.
You,
thanks, David. And we will talk to you real soon. And thanks everybody for listening.